Naked Odo, do I have your attention? Today we are talking about Season 4, Episode 25, Broken Link.
We made it! The finale, baby!
We did. You just broke everything. All of a sudden, like, you're not supposed to talk yet. We have a blank screen. It's our season finale. We are bringing our A game as usual. Mike, how you doing? We have gotten, once we finished this episode, but you have now witnessed the entire first 4 seasons of Deep Space Nine. How are you feeling?
You know, I'm feeling two ways, and hopefully you can assuage my more malaise feeling. Number one, definitely, so we're also, if I read that correctly, it's the 98th episode, so we're like close to the 100 episode mark.
Right.
So that's crazy to think we've done 100 of these things. Two, you know, our first podcast we did to completion together, David E. Kelly's The Practice, over on Out of Practice Podcast, available on your podcast streams and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
You know, after season 4, there wasn't a lot of quality content left. You know what I mean?
It was good through 5.
Yeah,
but the
what
last
I'm saying is
3
that, like,
seasons were...
Once we completed 4, it wasn't a lot of road left, right? So getting to the end of 4 here, and knowing there's only 7 seasons... I got a little nervous in the belly, being like, as the best behind us, but I've been assured by many players that the best is still to come.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I mean, I get it, though, right? Because a lot of series start to peter out after the first 4 or 5 seasons, and it starts to become a little bit repetitive, and if people leave, and it's sort of like, whatever, we've lost our momentum.
So I'm excited to get to the good stuff. I'm excited to I really feel... we're at the place now where I have a visceral connection to all of the characters. And so I was really prepared for some sort of a death or a real big launch point this episode, which we don't quite get, but there's a lot here. And there is I don't know if a death or a transformation of sorts. We'll get into it, but there's plenty here, is what I'm saying. A good episode.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But yeah, I mean, as a season finale, it's more intellectually giant than like pew pew giant until the very, very end. So we'll get into it, and stay around, folks. At the end of the episode, right after we do our stem bolts, Mike is going to be pitching us his vision of season 5 of Deep Space Nine. I'm excited to see what Mike is going to cook up for us in his imaginary Season 5 of Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
But before we do that, we have much work to do, including talking about last week's episode, Body Parts, and put in all of your opinions. Now, if you would like to have your opinion on the show, just leave it down below on the YouTube comments. If you want us to read it, there are 2 different ways, Mike. One, you can leave a super tip, thanks, whatever the heck you call it, with your comment. That'll get it read. Or you can be one of our patrons at patreon.com/K&M. And there you get all sorts of crazy fun stuff, including Mike watching the episode. You watch him, you watch the episode, and there's a Patreon-only chat going on live. I actually hopped in last night.
We had a lot of fun
for the season finale. Really fun. Our patrons are so smart and so funny.
Smart. And even the ones who couldn't make it chime in a day later or so and lambast me for not focusing. But listen,
always.
That's why we have to watch these things multiple times and then do the slide recap, because clearly sometimes, especially when the Chancellor CEO Jen joins us.
That's right.
Good times are going to roll. And we were having a hoot last night, let me tell you.
So here's my question. Here's my question to you, Mike. Will you commit to watching the episode multiple times?
I do on occasion. Because I like to watch it with the patrons the first time through on the small screen, and then we also have it on my Plex server, the 4K. I'd like to watch it on the big screen as too. So what's interesting, Keith, and I don't like to admit to this, because I play a character that is very laissez-faire. on TV. But even if I don't get a chance to do my second watch before we do our record, generally while the export's happening, I pop on the game room studio monitor and get it the day of, just so I can see if I feel comfortable with the way we adjudicated. Or sometimes it turns out I missed quite a bit, so I like to kind of fill in the blanks.
Oh yeah, well, because when you're watching it with the patrons, there's a performance element to it, so that you can't really be fully committed.
And since I'm off the companion now. Keith has told me, like,
yes, you are now off the companion.
But what I'm really excited about is two things. I got to tell you real quick. It's a season finale episode, so let's deal. Number one, it's been a slow build, but then a switch has flipped. Is Jen listening? Hold on. I'll make sure she's in the other room.
Uh-oh.
You might, if you check.
You realize this is a public forum.
I'm not sure how our toys episodes air, what the order is, but you might have noticed a subtle flip happen lately. I've always been like an outside looking in on the Trek universe. A switch has begun to flip, Keith, where I'm really getting into this thing, and I've been looking at like I've been looking at Captain Sisko busts and figures and like things that are like above the $12 toys list, and I'm like, oh no. I'm having an inner war.
Yeah. Do we have to have a conversation before I buy this? That is the
And the other thing I've been doing is once we complete a season on the show, I can then go on YouTube and unleash all of the behind the scenes and all the making of stuff of that season without fear of spoiler so far. Although I suspect since business is picking up these last 3 seasons, I got to be a little more cautious as I proceed.
There's a lot of like stuff to discuss and think about when we're done. We will definitely do the documentary and all of that after we finish the episode, or the series. So there we go. Anyway, we got to keep moving. We got to talk body parts. So here is what you had to say, starting with patron Joshua Cronin, who says, I love this episode. I think it's cool how they moved the baby to accommodate Nana, giving for interesting storytelling. I agree. It's one of those things where you can have a production complication arise, and you can make it a problem, right? And like try to do I put it behind pillows? How do we swing Nana out of the episode? Or you can use it as an opportunity. And make something cool, make something interesting, add a storyline that adds a wrinkle that you would never have thought of before. So it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. Joshua continues, and Quark, being one of my 2 favorite Star Trek characters ever, is gold in this. Great episode for him. And at the end, truth be told, I tear up every single rewatch. It's just so sweet what everyone does for him. Yes, it's a wonderful life, but I just love it. Solid 95 self-sealing stem bolts for me. Always love a good Ferengi episode. Jason Moe, also a patron, says, it's amazing and thoughtful and insightful conversations about politics and religion that one episode of Deep Space Nine can spark. But I'm here to talk about something much, much more important. Keith has never seen Karate Kid Part 2? One of my first movie girlfriends was 100% Kumiko from Karate Kid 2. Mike, would it interest you to know that the Kumiko actor later appeared on Star Trek? She played a villain in season 1 of Picard. Yeah, I mean, I imagine that she also would have been one of my screen girlfriends, but now I can't go back and watch it from that context because now I'm a pervy old fart.
Yeah.
And so I can't think about it that way. But
like many 80s like champion movies of our 80s past, the thing about the Karate Kid series, well, 1 and 2 and kind of 3, but is that when upon rewatch you realize that the performances pretty ubiquitously are on the terrible side. It's not actually, but there's some sort of magic they capture in the relationship and in some of the setups. So the 2 specifically, there's a lot of bizarre stuff happening, but it's in a new kind of wonderful setting. There's very high stakes. It's very dramatic. So there's still a lot to love in 2. I particularly really like it.
Well, it also prompted, as he says, 10-year-old Jason spent many afternoons in my neighborhood friend Julie's basement. roller skating around her ping pong table, not a euphemism, as we blasted The Glory of Love, Karate Kid 2's brilliant love song, as Mike rightly praised from her boombox. Julie pretending to be Kumiko and me pretending to be Daniel-san. Yeah, I don't know. Hey,
let's leave the story there.
I mean, what's Julie doing these days? She seems cool.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, 83 stem bolts for this episode. Good episode, but not super memorable, as many of the comments seem to be forgetting how good it was. YouTube viewer says, also a patron, this episode is not one of my all-time favorites of Deep Space Nine, but it was strategically placed, given that the stakes of Deep Space Nine are about to rise substantially. It's good to have a relatively light episode right here. It's a shame that that scene was cut, the cut scene that we read on the episode. Until your commentary, I hadn't thought of this episode as being a low-key knock on religion. In the 21st century, we usually think of religion in terms of monotheist or polytheist gods, but Confucianism, Taoism, Shinto, and Buddhism are largely philosophy-driven rather than deity-driven. I would argue that the Ferengi religion is a philosophical more than deity-driven religion. I agree. That's that's a very well thought out point. Decent episode, 75 out of 100 self-sealing stem bolts. JD says, well, Keith starts off with fraud. I'm going to sue you for malpractice. And Keith is too scared to read one of my whole comments. I mean, yes, but also I don't. You do things in a stream of consciousness, which is great as you're reading it, but you make reference to things I don't remember what I said.
Keith doesn't watch the episodes, nor does he edit them.
I have absolutely no idea what anybody is talking about when they're referencing what you and I said. All the Deep Space Nine stuff is great.
What's crazy, just to insert there, is that because I do the edit and I do a pretty thorough scrub just to make sure that we don't get ourselves canceled too much, I end up watching the episode twice and also watching our episode twice. So I am steeped not only in the lore of the show, but in the lore of each and every spot. So when I read JD's comment, I'm well aware.
You know what he means.
I'm well in on it.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
I chuckle liberally. Let me tell you, I chuckle liberally.
I mean, it's hilarious. It's always hilarious. But I just, the problem is not his hilarity. It's my memory of what the hell we said. He continues, Jason's right. The long seasons are nice because we get side stories, which are just filled out the lore and develop the characters. On the assisted suicide subject, remember that the best part of Star Trek V is the scene where McCoy wrestled with his dad's terminal disease that they found a cure for 5 months later. Yes,
Isn't that 2 weeks ago?
I do remember.
Kevorkian?
No. Well, but
Quark. Quark's trying
we kind of had both. It kind of was it was a back-to-back episode with those topics. But yeah, that was an interesting part. That was by far the best acted, best written part of Star Trek V. The story, it is interesting. Star Trek has a lot of different opinions on that particular topic. He continues, y'all coming and announcing the return of something you already brought back. Feels about right. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like announcing you're having a baby a week after you had the baby. I feel that way.
Yeah, sure.
For somebody who bloviates on the internet for 9 hours a week, I'm actually a pretty private dude. So I would probably announce it that way.
Yeah. We'd all be shocked.
Yes. Keith, during the watch-along, Jason and I already started writing an alternative scene in which Quark went to Worf and asked him to kill him. And Worf was just eager to do it and was like, wait here, let me get my mechlet. That's funny. I still argue that back in season 1, I think about the guy who made a clone to try to get out of the crime, yada yada. Why not go to a 24-hour clone store, get a copy of yourself, then pop it into the desiccator and Bob's your uncle. Here's some charred Quark in a jar contract. Fulfilled. A couple of people made that point.
I think I did.
Yeah, it's smart. It's true. This episode is a softer story, but it's good. It's easy and it's not overly dramatic, but there's drama despite the simplicity. It's got depth, and that's why I give it 90 self-sealing stem bolts. Harry Pothead quickly says, real fun episode, 85 stem bolts for sure. Also pointing out, we were talking about Charlie and our cats. I have a neighborhood full of cats because some stoned moron feeds them all the time. They hunt like tigers. Any chance you're that stoned moron feeding the cats? Because I'm frequently the moron feeding the
Hey, listen,
neighborhood
as long
cats.
as your colony, as long as the like neighborhood colony are fixed and there's like a trap and rescue taking place, I think feed the cats.
Definitely. Oh, for sure, for sure. No, I mean, like our neighborhood cats here are the most like they just basically walk around the neighborhood in a buffet. They're like fatter than I am.
They've done I've talked about this a million times. There's a documentary, I can't remember it, but they put a couple of GPS on these neighborhood cats and watch. They do like 14 to 18 mile loops. Just everybody thinks they own them. They're great. They're so smart.
Oh yeah, I have a shelter that I built for him, but he never goes in it because he's got a shelter across the street. It's probably a nicer shelter than what I built. Whatever. Kevin Miles gives it a 93.
Mine's got a server.
You've got a Plex server set up.
Just for the cats.
For the cats.
It's Garfield.
I think I mentioned it on a show 100 years ago. I built Charlie a man cave up in the wall. He doesn't use it anymore, but I built like a little house there, and I put up a football poster, a Phil Simms poster, and I put up a TV for him. The poster was a football card, and the TV was an old iPhone I just taped to the wall.
That's maybe the cutest thing you've ever said.
So
all right,
stupid.
Let's move forward.
Kevin Miles gives it a 93. Ryan Chesley has a very good question. He says it's a dumb question, but it's not. Did Brunt have anything to do with the false test results? I don't know why we didn't ask that question, because, like, it's quite possible this was all a setup from Brunt. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, he seems like he's too busy to
have just noticed that and hopped on that immediately.
Although maybe not. I mean, I imagine that the Ferengi desiccation exchange is rather popular.
It's public, but going there in person to like extort him leads me to believe that Brunt knows he wasn't actually dying.
Yes, he did not
was ready.
Seem surprised to learn that news. Yeah.
Yeah. I take it. It's headcanon. Brunt set up the whole thing. Mysterious Anne has a very interesting comment, as she always does, and says, I love this episode. Like Keith, I don't necessarily think of it when I'm listing my favorites, but every time I watch it, I remember how good it is. Another 93 stem bolter for me. I'm a person of faith who is active in religion, and I love the Divine Treasury scene too. It's brilliant and spot on. Mike, I appreciated the thoughts you shared during the Stembolts conversation about It's a Wonderful Life scene as an expression of what community, including, but not limited to, faith-based community should be and can be. Candidly, I don't think any religion or church is totally free from the malign influences of U.S. civic religion. Self-sufficiency, U.S. exceptionalism, prosperity gospel, etc. Man, that is so true. Religious nationalism is even worse and very scary in the world and around the world. Terrifying. That was me. Through the character of Brunt and some of the other glimpses we've gotten, Deep Space Nine has so far imagined a Ferenginar where people live under authoritarian capitalism, and where that power structure has also asserted itself as the state religion, and the only acceptable form of religious expression. The authoritarian capitalism is sort of our U.S. civic religion in a lot of ways. Fascinating. There don't seem to be any priests as a separate religious structure as on Bajor, but civic operating procedures and laws are made to feel more like rituals and scripture. The memorized verses, the special hand gestures, the bribes that resemble offerings, the rote things that must be said and done according to custom, the hierarchy, the reverence of leaders. I think it's a cautionary tale in the U.S. right now. It makes me appreciate true religious freedom, the freedom to have incredible religious diversity, and freedom not to have a state religion, imposed religion, or religious laws, or have any form of government leaders trying to assert themselves as religion gods. So smart. So
awesome.
smart.
And I will say, to put a button on, not a button, we're going to talk about it a lot more, I'm sure, but, you know, that does, a point we don't bring up often is, if I was to boil it down, right, what I would love to see, which would give me so much more positive vibes in the religious feelings, it would be to see some religious leadership, right, in that less using your religion as a carte blanche shield to defend all of your behavior, good, bad, or indifferent, and more people using their leadership positions and using that same energy to fight the wrongs within your religion and to expose that hypocrisy and attempt to change it from within, I'm all aboard that train.
Yeah, well, and I think of two examples who do that exactly. One, I've talked about it extensively, but my grandfather in his church with my grandmother and their friends, starting in the literal 1980s, using his church, through his church, to advocate and fight for gay rights. Not because it was in opposition to his church beliefs, because it was mandated by his church beliefs. I think that was like really using it for a force of good. And also, I think of like somebody like Jimmy Carter, right? Who has spent his entire 40-something years of post-presidency using his faith to guide him to actually help people and lift people up, and not himself up or his religion up. It's what motivated and called him to do good acts.
And Anne's other point that she brings up is so important too, because we've seen recently and in the past that those at power try to redefine this country as a very religiously based, specifically religiously based state, and it's not. We are based on the foundation of religious freedom, which is very different than religious centralism. So lots of stuff.
No, for sure. It drives me nuts when people it's a Christian country. Just look at our money. It says, "In God we trust." Yeah, sure it does. When we added that in the 50s, the 1950s, not the 1850s.
And we tie that then to patriotism, to nationalism, and then you're defined. If you're not religious, you're not
drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But I think everybody
we've ground our gears many times.
We all get it. But just
well done.
This week, the caliber of comments here, just some really all of our patrons are like professors, not patrons. They're so much smarter than us. Thank you so much for weighing in on all of that. These fascinating discussions are kind of why I like this show. Both our show and Deep Space Nine, because it stimulates, the old brain boxes there. All right, so let's talk now, finally, about Broken Link, the season finale of season 4, which aired on June 17th, 1996. The top song continued to be The Crossroads, Bone Thugs and Harmony. Can't wait to hear some of that, Mike.
Crossroads, Bone Thugs and Harmony. Thank you.
See, you know what I love about that? Let's just have a little window into Mike's head, right? When I say, let's hear a little bit of it, he's got this face like, oh, come on, you're not going to make me I'm not going to do this, whatever. But before he made that face, he already turned on the reverb. That's so that was like a whole skit. Like he wasn't planning to do that.
Well, you know what, Keith? Let me put it a different way. Let's listen to maybe how we started the Patreon watch along last night. There was some music involved there.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on the Doobie Doos, we got CEO Chancellor Jen.
Finale.
We got the soundboard.
Season 4 finale. Yeah.
We got Keith in the chat.
Yeah.
It's in the chat.
Already regretting it.
We don't do camera until it's time.
So that's what you're missing if you're not joining us over at patreon.com/KNM.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I rarely am there, but I went onto it. And there's like this blank, there's a setup screen before the show starts, and you guys are just like, just all by yourself. And I'm like, what have I walked into?
What's best is that we didn't even know that
people pay money
high.
for that. Of course. Oh, we knew you were high. Trust me.
I said hot, not high. Come on, not on a Monday night, not on a Tuesday night. Come on.
Oh, no, you're professionals. All right. The top movie this week, trying to keep us moving, was The Cable Guy, which took in $19 million. Ooh. We have a secret meeting happening.
Well, the washing machine is on, and I know you probably can't hear it, but in this event that you can, not cool.
We can't. The washing machine is definitely gated out. Your clean drawers are more important than whatever that's happening. All right. So, Mike, it is time for you to tell us what was on TV.
Keith, it's the summer, and there was nothing. airing tonight that was not a rerun. Nothing!
Okay, well, we're about to spend a summer between, for me, sophomore and junior year of high school. Big doings. What was Voyager doing? Nothing! Because they were also...
We had our licenses, right? So we're 16
That's
now. So
right.
This is a big summer.
Was this my first summer job or second summer job? I forget whether... Because this was 96. No, so it had to be my first one, because the first time I had my license.
Hold on. Synchronicity. Guys, fast forward. Use the chapters below. I'm going on a ride here real quick.
Oh, here we go.
I've got to tell you. So I went to... My first job, as I've mentioned many a time, it was working at the pizza shop, right? Mm-hmm. This summer, maybe next summer too, but this summer definitely was an awesome summer at the pizza shop at Angelo's Pizza. So I went on this past weekend, Keith. I went for a run with my wife down in King of Prussia, where I grew up. We stopped at my old stomping grounds, the old pizza joint. It's been 30 years since then. So Tony, the guy who owns it, was still there or whatever. But anyway, I'm paying, and the guy behind the counter he goes, "Hey, Mike." And I was like, "Hey." Cut to the chase here. The dude I worked with, one of the guys I worked with, Jose, from way back in 97, that summer, Tony, there was a couple of deaths in his family, so he took off. So me and Jose spent this almost entire summer working together. He was a big fella back then, but he's rail skinny now. I didn't even recognize him. He's back for this summer to help train up a couple of guys. Anyway, he remembered me right away. I didn't remember him. I felt terrible. But we reminisced about this summer that we're watching on TV right now.
That's crazy.
My job in 97 with this dude, Jose, rocking Angelo's Pizza. I saw him this week. I wish.
Wow.
So it's all come back. It's all coming back to me now. Pizza's great there.
Oh, well, I'd go for some pizza. My second summer job was at a pizza place, Zachary's Pizza in Williston, Vermont.
It doesn't get more Italian than that. Zachary's Pizza in Williston, Vermont.
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, it was bad. Bad pizza, bad everything.
This episode brought to you by Zachary's Pizza. It's bad.
Zachary's Pizza, I don't think it exists anymore. But they renamed it something else. There might be one Zachary's left. Anyway, but I think I was working at a coffee roasting plant this summer. Anyway, so all right. So luckily, we've started our summer jobs. We're getting ready for season 5. But are we going to make it there? Because you know what's coming in the weekly world news headlines. We might not make it, folks, because December 31st, 1996 is Judgment Day. A panel of the world's foremost Bible experts answer the question of the millennium. And boy, look at those professors of judgment.
Yeah, they a lot of facial hair.
Well, I mean, that's how you can tell you're smart.
No, that's
right?
fair. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
not our best weekly world news, but
well, it's a bold choice because you've got to have an episode for January 97.
Yeah.
Or you've got to have an issue. But luckily, this was like 6 months. They probably recycled it over a couple different times. All right. So let's talk about this episode. Broken Link was directed by Les Landau, who last directed A Session, and has a teleplay by Robert Hewitt Wolfe and Ira Stephen Bear. They brought in the big kids to write this, but it has a story by George A. Brozak, and who also created the story for False Prophets on Voyager and did uncredited story on Birthright Part 2 in Next Gen, but I believe it was a submission. So somebody who pitched stories and got a few of them on. So, and we only have one tiny little piece of trivial trivia.
Should we skip the bumper?
I think we can skip it. We've been going because there's only one little piece. So Leslie Beavis's character, the smuggler lady, is finally named in the script for this episode. Rhiannage. I can't do Star Trek names. Beavis previously appeared as the character. I don't know why I did a funny voice for it. Rhiannage. Batman. Appeared in the season 2 opener, The Homecoming, as well as the season 3 opener, the season 3 episode, The Abandoned, but finally gets a name here. But you know, people who have names that I am more happy to pronounce than the Star Trek nerds. Who would that be, Mike?
No, man. Once you start a bit, you got to complete the bit. Using that voice, Keith will introduce you to our patrons.
Okay, great. We've got Brian Kimball Beersack. We have Jason Moe, Peter Bank, Frank Wrench, Quarks Bar, Joshua Cronin, Ryan Chesley, Andrew Hayes. I'm doing
It's a bit of a
Sean
Connery in
Yes. Henry Hayes and the Mysterious, Worf's Bootsevs, Charles Babbage, Harry Pothead,
President Bush,
CRM Productions, Nikolai Ivanovich Lobachevsky,
Obama,
Delusions at Noon, YouTube Viewer, James Hubbard, JD Makes, Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell at CRM, Pat, Joshua Cronin, Jerry John Dillard III, Lutz Kremer, Wyatt Eldridge, and Chancellor Jen. You can all join them at patreon.com/KNM.
If it's worth joining just for that, folks.
Wow, I'm so sorry, everybody. All right, Sean Connery. Sometimes it's okay to hit a woman. Let's say, I can never listen to Sean Connery without.
Someone clip that out and just attribute it to Keith.
Dude, that's Sean Connery. Here's the thing about. Not only did he say that once, he doubled down on it 20 years later.
Yeah.
It was hard to watch The Rock with that knowledge. All right, so our guest stars this week include Salome Jens back as the female changeling.
Moomy.
Robert O'Reilly is back as Gowron. Jill Jacobson is here as Shallan, and Leslie Beavis as Rhiannon. With special guest star Andrew J. Robinson as Garak, and Andrew Hawks as Amatagan. Whew. What do you say? I started I'm feeling a little tired, not feeling great, but here we are. We're fired up. Let's go into our screening room. All right. So in our teaser, Odo has been summoned to Garak's for a setup. An attractive Bajoran lady who runs a cafe aggressively flirts with him. And Odo has about as much game as I do.
It's not a pretty picture.
I'm gonna die alone in my basement. She leaves, and of course, Odo is annoyed. Garak expresses his confusion why Odo refuses to explore the good parts about being a humanoid. Then, out of nowhere, Odo starts convulsing and collapses. And that is so Garak's arc in this episode is so fascinating. We'll have to just keep an eye on it as we move forward. But we're more concerned about Odo being in peril. So in Act 1, Odo goes to the infirmary, and Bashir explains that Odo has a goo disease, and he's fluctuating, but he has no idea what to do about it. And he suggests it could just be puberty or menopause, but that activity makes it worse, so sit and stay. Cue 10,000 priapism jokes on the Patreon watch-along. So, I take it back. Don't subscribe.
Yeah,
Meanwhile...
good stuff. The stakes are high. Even we were jokey jokes, but the stakes are high, clearly. I actually thought the teaser was really cool because what seems like a comedic toss away before we get to the convulsing into the disease bit ends up coming around to be quite just as furtive to the overall kind of topic of the episode or the thesis. I didn't... It's, going back and on the rewatch, you always see some breadcrumbs as to where we're going or where we've been. I didn't catch it this time, and it's really cool. It's clever the way they worked that in.
Well, in a lot of ways, that is the difference between the A writers and the B writers. That there is nothing that happens that doesn't matter. There's nothing that is out of place, both story structure-wise, the A to B to C of the plot, character-wise, but also thematic-wise. So, this is a lot of pieces of the puzzle are pushed forward by that throwaway hot Bajoran lady, because we have Odo's relationship with Kira diverging a little bit. You have, we're going to find out about the changelings being aware of all of that. You have Garak's arc as sort of like, I'm your gay bestie, but also it might have just a tiny bit of attempted genocide coming up later. And also Odo exploring his humanity. Like, these is exactly what you said. You watch at the beginning, oh, it's just a little toss off, whatever, who cares? And then like, oh wait, this actually is important for every single other piece of this story. Good writing, folks. That's what that is. Meanwhile, the rest of our heroes are watching Chancellor Gowron, the predecessor to Chancellor Jen, of course, giving a Putin-esque speech about refusing to give back territory they took over from the Cardassians. Furthermore, the Federation must abandon the Arcanus sector or else, to which everyone says, uh-oh. The Klingons relinquished their claim over that territory 400 years ago, but now they are demanding it back. Sisko assumes it is just a chance to rattle his saber. But why? And I wrote down, good lord, this is prescient, and they're nervous about another war breaking out. And so whether this is Crimea or Ukraine, we can see exactly what the Poot Gowron is doing here.
I think that it's important. What Deep Space Nine does so well is they allow themselves the ability to do some of these episodes where we zoom in. Actually, it was one of our criticisms of Strange New Worlds, right? Where we're like, you know what? For a show called Strange New Worlds, we don't spend a lot of time on any Strange New Worlds. On Deep Space Nine, we do have some episodes where we go down to a planet and we spend some time there. But even a little scene like this, even if we hadn't followed it up at the end, which we do, but even if it was just a little scene like this, reminds us of the big picture brinksmanship taking place. It's not just the main threat of the Dominion, right? You've got the Klingon acting crazy. You've got a bunch of people on edge. You've got the Cardassians don't quite know whose side they are or what they want. Everybody's up to the brink and ready. Anything could happen at any moment, and we get these little scenes to remind us of that. And it's awesome.
That sparks me to think about the difference between this and Next Gen. And the thought that I had was that Deep Space Nine really focuses on the micro and the macro. Micro meaning the small character development, growth, and change in their own internal emotional lives. This, Odo and the dating and these big things, or these small character things, and the giant geopolitical, zoomed out, quadrant defining, leaders of this and territory conquerors and wars, that kind of stuff. So it's really the really big and the really small. Whereas Next Gen is almost exclusively about the middle, right? You go to a planet of aliens you don't know, and you think about a concept where it's specific to that planet or that conflict. It's about an idea, it's about a concept. And, there is plenty of character work on Next Gen, but it's not quite serialized character work. It's sort of moments of character work. And so I see that sort of like the middle of this, deeply personal, giant political sort of issue of the week, planet-sized. So it's like person-sized, planet-sized, quadrant-sized. And I think the way that Deep Space Nine differentiated itself is by focusing on the other aspects of that. Anyway, just a random thought.
I like it.
Everybody is nervous about another war breaking out, with the Klingons causing trouble. Kira starts doing a series of sneezes because she's pregnant. Good job, Nana. Those sneezes are hard to fake, especially like 15 of them in a row. And meanwhile, Worf and Dax are arguing a little bit. Chemistry, sparky sparks. So back in the infirmary, Odo is not feeling well, but Kira has come to visit. He doesn't want company, but she knows what he really needs. A criminal activities report. It's a great way to take his mind off of his pain. And it's a great moment here because it's just like a 10-second thing that isn't about them, but it shows just how well she knows him.
Not only that, great tie into last week where we ended with, here's the help you won't ask for, but we as a community around you will give you. What do they do with Odo? And she knows what he needs here. Then Ben knows, big picture, what he's going to need for the long voyage to keep his keep his mind off things, and even at the risk it is to bring Garak anywhere. So those themes of community, those themes of them working as an ensemble, as a team that we've built over these 4 seasons, all firing.
And in a lot of ways, there's an element here, both with Odo, but also last week with Quark, where it's, I'm going to help you and give you what you need, but I'm going to do it in a way that is very aware of your pride, right? Because both Odo and Quark are very prideful. And so when they helped out Quark, it couldn't look like charity. It had to look like we were doing an imposition on you for you to accept these gifts. And Odo the same way. I'm not saying that I'm nervous for you and I care about you and you must be going through an emotional difficult time. I'm just going to give you this thing and not address the emotional part of it because of Odo's pride here.
Yeah, right. Especially in Trek, and you've mentioned this with Next Gen, where it's competency porn. We're getting, it's weird when we say that, but I think the point stands. But here it's also shows a high emotional acuity as well.
Yeah.
Especially on Ben's part here, because he knows he has to get something from Garak, but also stroke Garak's ego, because that's the best way to sort of get what you want from him. Yeah.
Everybody here has very high EQs, and I like that very, very much. So Odo notices something important and sits up. He goes to the cargo bay and confronts purple-headed smuggler lady that we've seen before. He tries to stop her, but then starts to goo again. He's in a ton of pain and collapses. He turns into a puddle and his hand reaches out at the end. It's quite horrific. There's a lot of gooing in this episode, and the gooing looks terrible by today's standards, and it's tough. When they remaster this, which eventually they will, I know that they have, there's a lot of arguments to be made that they should remaster the special effects to look exactly like it did. I think the Odo gooing thing, were it me, I would argue, make it look better. Make it look contemporary, because it doesn't look that way because of an artistic decision. It looks that way because that's what they had budget and technology-wise. I think the artist's intent would be to make that look cool.
It also feels like, because it's just clearly a digital composite on top of right. It feels like it would be easy to do. I mean, relatively easy. The problem for me is not even that it looks that bad, right? It's very of its time. It firmly dates it, and this is a show that I think on many levels exists, is so current, and it holds up so well.
Its ideas and its performance, very much so.
It dates it unnecessarily, right? The effects, but also there's such a gulf. This episode's a great example of it. There's such a gulf between the digital effect and when they do the practical that it makes both look worse. It's
kind of jarring. Yeah. So I would say,
except for his face, the facial stuff is always great. For
sure, yeah.
It's the costume stuff that doesn't quite work.
It's just the goo. It's just for me. It's just the digital gooing. I think we can just clean it up. Just make that more contemporary. Don't change anything else. I think that would help the storytelling as opposed to take us out of it. So in Act 2, Odo wakes up in the infirmary. He's now having a harder time holding his shape. His destabilization is increasing rapidly, and he's only got a week to remain solid. Bashir sent his findings to Dr. Mora, who invited Odo to come back and do more research. Odo says, hell no, which is a great piece there. If you have been paying attention and watching, you know exactly what's going on there. And if you don't, it's just going to move forward. But it's obvious now where he has to go. He has to go back to his people. Sisko, interestingly, agrees right away, and they have a plan to head into Dominion space and send a distress signal. Kira wants to come, but keeps sneezing, and Sisko makes her stay because of the baby. I hope you get the shot here, because there's a shot of her and Bashir sitting next to each other as this happens. And Siddig's smirk, knowing behind the scenes, there it is, behind the scenes context, is chewing on that fourth wall. Whose fault it is that she can't go on this mission. That is yeah, that's right. That is exactly what's on his face there. The Defiant is ready to go, and Garak wants to come.
Let's give Ben, hold on, let's give Ben his proper weight of this moment, right? Because it's so easy, of course, the plot's driving us directly to where we're going, but let's just like stew on the decision here. We love Odo, right? But in order to go where they gotta go and do what they gotta do, it's not just jeopardizing the crew he's taking with him, or the fact that they could easily kill them all or hold them hostage, but it's, once again, talk about brinksmanship, it's like going to have a summit with the leaders of Iran, right? Anything could frickin' happen. We could pull any trigger, anything could set off after that. So he's making a lot of assumptions that they're gonna abide by, whatever sort of tentative rules of war we have. But they've shown enough restraint that I guess he feels like they can do this. At no point do you sense that he has any Garak intentions, right?
No.
Of like a military sort of plan B. He's just going in a purely fix Odo situation here.
Well, and that's the thing about the Founders, that what we've seen thus far is that they are certainly devious. They are certainly ruthless, possibly malevolent, but they do operate within their own internal logic. Mm-hmm. And so they're not chaotic in a way where you sort of like, you don't like, who knows? They might just do anything crazy, because they're not sort of in a desperate place. They're thinking they're coming from a position of strength, so they don't have to, do anything crazy. So I understand why he feels like this is something that can be navigated without starting World War III, but we'll see. So Garak, I said, wanted to come, so they put Garak in the mess hall, and he explains that he wants to ask the Founders if there were any Cardassian survivors from the attack. After doing a fashion critique of the extras, Garak is particularly flamboyant this episode. It's the contrast between the two different Garaks we get, great. So Sisko has another idea. Like you said, keep Odo busy by spinning mysterious tales of spying. Garak gets it immediately and promises to keep his head spinning the entire time with a mixture of truths and lies and half-truths, which are Garak's whole deal. So they can't transport Odo.
Now, I want to give a little extra. I had a little headcanon here too.
All right.
Odo's in a lot of pain, but they don't need him distracted just because he's in a lot of pain, right? He is a grown-ass man. I also think that there's an element here, at least I took from it, that there is a bit of concern, right? As much as we know Odo's on our side, we've seen continued attempts and continued times when things like this happen where Odo gets a little erratic in his pursuit to get home. And remember, he's done some crazy stuff. And so I think the distraction here is also to kind of keep Odo in a stasis. So as we get closer to the Founders, he don't go ahead and flip on us or something like that of that nature.
That's interesting. I hadn't considered that.
Remember he stole a runabout and he took
did,
Kira with him and all kinds of stuff?
And he did it because he was genetically forced to do it. And in some ways, there's some parallels there between Odo and Data, who in an episode commandeers the Enterprise because of code that got put into him. And you realize both of them are sort of superheroes, and they're overpowered compared to everybody else. And if they don't have full agency, stuff can go real wrong.
As much as Odo has defied the Founders in many ways, we know there's a genetic link that is unpredictable.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I like it. So they can't transport Odo, so he needs to walk to the Defiant himself. And Quark comes up to see him off. They spar, but the subtext is clear. Quark is very concerned about his best friend. And it's a really good scene, and this is where like Armin's their chemistry together, and Armin's being able to calibrate Quark in all sorts of different ways. The concern and the friendship there is very clear in this moment.
Is that a wig he's wearing? Did they put goop in his hair? Whatever they do to liquefy his face is incredible. Is it all latex work? The stuff on the costume doesn't work for me. I don't know if it's the 4K or if it just looks very much
looks like wax or something. Yeah.
But the facial transformation is so kind of grotesque, and it feels wet and it feels gooey. It's so good. Whoever worked on that,
probably like KY or something. They just so good, slab it all over. It must have been so uncomfortable for Renee to shoot this. Oh, awful.
But helpful, right? Like that kind of feeling would help you get to because he's apparently dying.
And because he's fighting off two things. One, the pain and the physical exertion that he's going through, but also the embarrassment, like the walk that he has to go through here, which, is a good thing to sort of watch again later, because it's really powerful.
And the extras do yeoman's work here. The extras kind of giving that. There's a bit of we respect him, but we're a little afraid of him in this form, and we're also sort of gawking a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he's so vulnerable here, and with again talking about his pride and his shyness, his whatever, showing vulnerability is so hard for him, and there's no avoiding it at this point. So Odo also, bravely. Well, maybe that's my wormhole, but. Like, if it's so hard to hold his human form, why wouldn't he just goo up until they get there?
And they take him in his bucket?
Yeah.
I think he's probably afraid that he won't be able to get back.
To rehuman. Interesting.
To rehuman.
Okay, that fixes the wormhole. That was my one wormhole.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Odo bravely walks through the promenade, filled with 10,000 extras, as he fights to keep his shape. This would be hard for anybody, but for someone like Odo, this is flat torture.
Like, look at that the extras right there in this shot.
Yeah.
Right? Well done.
It's tough, like a mixture of concern and gawking.
One Bolian.
Oh, that's tough.
And a ring light in the top right.
And a ring light. Somebody's doing
a TikTok.
TikTok live. Here we are. Odo's doing the walk of shame.
He's so...
Like and subscribe.
Girl, I am gagged and gooed.
I can't believe this. I screamed that. Thanks for the heart. Okay. That was terrible.
That couldn't have been less cool.
We're so old. So the Defiant heads off through the wormhole. Once they get through, they turn on the distress signal and don't cloak. It's a very risky maneuver. Meanwhile, Garak spins yarns for Odo in the infirmary. Was he an assassin posing as a gardener on Romulus? Was he not? Who knows? On the bridge, O'Brien complains about his new living arrangement with Kira in their quarters. Funny little moment there. He wants Bashir to come live with him so he's not so outnumbered. But then, a whole mess of Jem'Hadar fighters arrive immediately on the bridge. Fighters arrive and surround the Defiant, which is the end of Act 2.
I love that little, housekeeping scene because we earned it, right? In the big picture, it's so insignificant, like O'Brien's... but, there are some shows, like The Office, weird connection, but where it's all about the water cooler talk. That's what the show's about. But here, they are working 24/7 basically. But so it's nice, like when they're at work, like a conversation
to have a little water cooler in that moment. Yeah,
it worked. I don't know, it worked amongst these big stakes. It worked.
It was fun. So the Defiant has been swarmed with fighters, and they get a message saying a Dominion representative wants to beam aboard. They've barely made the decision when the female changeling and a bunch of Jem'Hadar soldiers beam directly onto the bridge as a surprise. Always good at the theatrical intimidation moves. Mm-hmm. Just like, oh yeah, we can come in whenever we want. Yikes. A Jem'Hadar grabs O'Brien's chest and tries to Kalima for a bit, But the female changeling says stop. I don't know what that was about. I don't know what that... Why?
Roid rage, baby, roid rage.
But, like, what was the plan? He was, like, trying to...
He's juiced up on him.
He's just trying to, I don't know what that... Star Trek fight choreography sucks. I love Trek with all of my heart, but the fight choreography sucks.
All right, 4K they didn't help with the wig blending here.
I mean, honestly, if you look at wig lines on anything ever, it's always bad.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
It is a hard one to do. Anyway, so the female changeling says, "Give me Odo and leave. He needs the Great Link." Cisco naturally says, "Nope, we're coming along." And interestingly, she agrees quickly. And the Jem'Hadar is going to fly the ship blind so you don't know where the Founder's homeworld is. He puts a VPN on the view screen and they warp off. It is interesting how quickly she agreed to all of this. And as we see, the risk with what Garak tried to do, like, it's pretty risky for them to do it. I start to wonder, like, well, are there other ulterior motives for allowing everybody else to come along and witness this? I don't know.
Well, I look at it two ways. One, if the summation here, or if the inference here is that all of the beings live in this lake unless they're out doing stuff,
right?
Then there could be billions of armies, all kinds of stuff living in that lake. So once they have them there, they sort of have the upper hand, right? They're on our turf. So, and I really think two things are clear here. One, and to their detriment in many ways. One, at all costs, they want him back. They want Odo back, which is interesting because the way it turns out, we can have a philosophical discussion as to why that happens, right? Because, like you said, there's clearly a code here, because if they just wanted him back and he clearly was happy in the link, or happy is very pejorative, but it's much more complicated than that. But they could have kept him. I think very easily they could have kept him here, or at least trapped him, or
trapped him for sure. Yeah.
So I think it was worth the risk, and I also think they have potentially an outsized feeling of the upper hand, as you said.
Yeah.
I just don't think they feel any threat from these guys, and so they're like, yeah, sure, come. Just we have to put this blindfold on first.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Like
especially since
hubris.
They're literally marooned on an island.
They are very confident.
Yeah.
And they do not see the Federation as a threat in any real way. And they've proven with the Cardassian-Romulan invasion that they're not really.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they just wiped them out, kicked their ass immediately, no problem.
And with the reveal where we saw later, like they've set up the chess pieces so that they don't even have to come for us themselves, right? They've got incels planted in other places where they can just push a couple buttons and have us occupied.
Yeah, a lot going on. So she visits Odo in the infirmary. Odo is even more melty. The practical goo effects are much better than the digital ones.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't have a problem with how it looks on the uniform. It looks like they used wax, but like, I was actually fine with it.
Yeah.
The changeling comes in and she takes Odo's hand and they goo together for a moment. She helps him stabilize, but does not cure him. But she kicks everyone else out so she and Odo can talk privately. She says the founders hoped he'd return to them on his own, after Kira started banging Shakar. Odo is surprised she knows, but of course she says there's very little that we don't know.
You think we don't got ring cameras?
Yeah, somebody filled your entire house with ring cameras for no reason, Mike. And, Odo, anyway, and they of course knew about the illness before they came for help. And Odo says, how exactly do you keep so informed about my well-being? There's very little that escapes our attention. Are you saying that you knew I was sick even before we left the station? What do you think? Odo says, I think you did this to me. You caused my illness so I'd be forced to come home. As I said, I wish the circumstances of this meeting were different. So, yup, they certainly did.
They had their own wet market, Keith. She's Wuhan Mumi.
Nope. Nope.
Get it? Wet market? Because they're gooey?
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Aaron Rodgers over there. She reminds Odo that he has killed a changeling, the first ever changeling to harm another, and now he's being brought home to be judged by the Great Link. And she admits that they did force him to come home. He was right. Now, Mike, you might ask, well, how did they infect him?
Well, aren't they part him?
Right, but how did they infect him all the way on the other side of the quadrant?
There could, I mean, for all we know, they could be in the. Somebody could be on the ship, could have poisoned them, anything. You have a specific, you have a concrete thought?
Well, let's just say in the if you go into the script on the episode For the Death, I'm gonna read you this scene with
when
the
the guy
stage
touched
directions.
him, right?
Wayun says, let me show you how. All you need to know is, are you ready to go home? Angle on Wayun. For the Vorta, this is an important moment. He knows that Odo's answer will have significant consequences on both his life and in Odo's. Odo says, no, but I'm ready to end this conversation. Stage directions. Wayun looks at Odo for a beat, then gives him a good-natured clap on the shoulder. In case anyone's interested, when he touches Odo, Wayun is purposely infecting Odo with the disease that almost kills him in Broken Link. Wayun says, then it's over. After all, you're a founder. I live to serve you.
Keith, how did you keep that from me? That's awesome. And they never, do they disclose that to us as an audience? No, it's just an acting beat.
It's there in the stage directions of the script.
Huh. That's awesome.
Cool, huh?
That's great. That's great.
So in Act 4, the judgment will be going, his judgment will be going into the Great Link and open his thoughts, so they can understand why he made the decision. This has never happened before, so it took all of this time for them to argue about what to do with Odo. Odo says, I'm sorry I've caused you so much trouble. Perhaps we're to blame. We sent you away. But I'm the one who's going to be punished. That remains to be seen. What if I don't cooperate? What if I refuse to join the Link? I stabilized your condition temporarily, but only the Link can heal you. If you refuse to join with us, you'll die. Oof. She leaves the infirmary, and Garak follows her to ask about possible survivors from the attack. And she says, there were no Cardassian survivors. You mean they're all dead? And this is such a great beat for her.
So awesome.
Terrifying. They're dead. You're dead. Cardassia is dead. Your people were doomed the moment they attacked us. I believe that answers your question. Okay.
It's like, that's so Machiavelli, baby, right?
Whew, that is like, you mentioned it on the watch along, but I love how she softens herself differently for everybody she comes across. Mm-hmm. With Sisko, it's like, I'm pragmatic, like we're both leaders here, I have the upper hand, but I'm not like crazy. With Odo, it's all about this, like I'm your mom, like I'm a little strict, but I'm also loving. I want you to come home to Christmas, Odo. It's going to be different this time, I promise. And with Garak, it's just like full on, go F yourself. I'm going to murder you and everyone you've ever known.
Which, speaking of great writing, right? The scene coming up we're about to talk about, it makes, Garak he's an old super spy, and he's got weird intentions. You never know where he sits. However, you can make a very strong argument that he is operating militarily strategic.
Logically,
based on this threat from basically Hitler, the leader,
Yeah.
telling you I'm gonna kill everyone, you'd be like, well, we have an opportunity. The threat was made. I have a duty to take care of this threat. Yeah.
Not wrong. Very interesting. Naturally, Garak is appropriately terrified. That is the right face to make when you hear, I'm going to wipe out your entire species. So Worf, Sisko, and O'Brien debate how to rescue Odo from the link, but there's no way. They can't beam him out or anything. And then gooey Odo comes in and says, don't bother. I want to be judged. Sisko says, are you sure that's what you'll find in the Great Link? Justice? Good question. Sisko goes to the bridge. They're almost there. And Sisko says, I'm coming too. So Sisko, Bashir, Odo, and the female changeling beam down to a rock in a sea of founder goo. Now it's literally just a tiny little outcropping in the entire ocean. The female changeling goes into the pond, and Odo...
I think it's such a cool science fiction thought, right? That, we talk about... this also very well demonstrates... So many things recently have talked about my spirituality, and this very much designates my philosophy of being a agnostic. It's just a sea of goo, man. And we're this little outcrop. I don't know what's happening in that goo. I don't know who's who or what's what. All I know is like what I can control, which is this little tiny outcrop in a sea of goo. And that is very much what we get. It's like a great sign. There's a whole society, a species, a civilization in this goo, man. And we don't have to see it on screen because we know it's there.
In such a great moment coming right up here, we don't even recognize what it is. Like, because Bashir's about to throw a rock into it thinking it's water. Mm-hmm. Like, forgetting. Yeah. It's right there in front of him. It's that's such a great moment. Anyway, but before that happens, Odo gives a nod and a smile, which is, go back and watch it again because there's a lot in this look. It's the same thing with the last look that Quark gives Odo. He gives us a nod and a tiny smile that basically says, goodbye. This might be goodbye. Yeah. This legitimately might be goodbye. And so that's what that look was there. The Quark Odo beat, that was there's a good chance this is goodbye. And it was a really interesting, great acting done by everybody involved. So in Act 5, hours have passed, and Sisko and Bashir are waiting on the rock. This is the moment where Bashir almost tosses a rock into the goo. Such a great, human beat there. Thankfully, Sisko saves him. Then, on the Defiant, Worf heads into the Jeffries... heads into the Jeffries tube and catches Garak, rearranging isolinear chips. He's trying to launch torpedoes and destroy the Founder's planet. And he says, I was hoping to gain control of the phasers as well. I just hadn't gotten to it yet. Don't you see? We have an opportunity here, a chance to end the Dominion threat once and for all. We have enough firepower on the ship to turn that planet into a smoking cinder. Personally, I think that would be a very good thing. Worf says, what about Odo, Captain Sisko, and Dr. Bashir? They'll die. And once the Jem'Hadar ships realize what we're doing, so will we. But what are our lives compared to saving the entire Alpha Quadrant? Worf says, we're not here to wage war. I'm not talking about war. What I'm proposing is wiping out every Founder on that planet, obliterating the Great Link. Come now, Mr. Worf, you're a Klingon. Don't tell me you'd object to a little genocide in the name of self-defense. Woof!
I mean, that's basically all right, you travel back in time, right? You have 5 minutes, and you're in a room with baby Hitler, right? He's just a little baby. It's just a little baby, a little innocent baby.
Yeah.
Would you kill that baby, knowing what it would protect?
Yeah. And I will not mention certain geopolitical things happening right now, but there's a big distinction here because he's going to wipe out all these people because they have planned to and have the ability to wipe out the entire quadrant. And it is not an idle threat that the founders have made to his entire species. They actually can pull it off. It's interesting. So Worf says
that's sort of like one of the things in life. Sorry to get philosophical, but you know, there's a time in your life, mostly in youth, where you're so bullish on how easy those black and white decisions are, right? That's easy. I'd smother that baby. No, of course not. I would never kill a baby. And then as you live and you have many experiences and meet many people, you realize that like, oh, there's no right answer. And you have to just like live with that disquiet.
Well, and in this moment, right? Without wanting to give away spoilers, right? Worf, with the hindsight of season 7, would he do this differently? I don't know. I don't know. It's very, very interesting. So, they then fight, and Garak's stunt double puts up a surprisingly good fight.
Yeah, they had to show that he has some training. So
yeah, I mean, Garak being able to fight off Worf for that long is very impressive. The stunt double coverage, not great. Pretty obvious, but that's fine. It's whatever. Strike. Back on the planet, Odo emerges out of the goo suddenly. He's naked. The female changeling comes out and explains, here we go, Odo has been made human. He's a solid now. That is his punishment. And she says, poor Odo. Perhaps we should have killed you. It would have been far less cruel. He's yours. Take him and go. Odo, draped to look like Michelangelo's creation of Adam from the Sistine Chapel, as they beam out there. Although it reminds me a little bit of that. Obviously, he's got the finger there, creation of Adam. It's very obvious what that reference is. But with Bashir sitting behind him, it also reminds me a fair amount of the Pietà. With Bashir in that position, also by Michelangelo, and also in the Vatican. And one of the few pieces of art, the Pietà specifically, that in person lives up to the hype. Because I went to go see it once, and in the Vatican, I mean, my God, what that place is. But seeing it up close, what he's able to do with that marble, it is breathtaking.
The sculpture in general is is like, I can't explain it. It's magical.
It's stone, and it looks like liquid fabric, and if I could touch it, I would expect it to move in my hand.
Or it's
spectacular.
Well, let's not go into that diatribe. So in I was going to go on a whole thing. So what's cool here is that she also expresses such pathos, because before I think they always believed they were getting him back, and here they've lost him. They made a decision that was the just punishment, which shows that whatever their code in there is, they follow it. And it's a power shift, right? Because they are releasing him here, and they've sort of, I don't want to say they've lost, but they're acquiescing in a way, which we haven't seen them do yet. So there's a dynamic shift. I think it is a
loss for them. I think it really is a loss for them. Like I think it is very clear that their emotional connectedness in the link is genuine. It's real. Like, this is genuinely devastating to them.
Well, Odo will describe that later as well.
And for Odo as well. Like, it really is something special that's real. It's not just them talking a good game. I think it really comes at a cost to both of them.
However, right, with that also comes just a reminder. Oh, the technology these people possess also includes the ability to change the fundamental existence matter structure of a being. Like that. Yeah. Right? Forget souping and desouping, but we can make you a human. We could, God knows what else they can do. Holy crap. Clearly they can, oh boy. The threat remains large.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't think we walk out of this feeling like, no big deal. There's nothing to worry about there. So back in the Defiant, Bashir confirms that Odo is now human and has blood. No trace of the changeling DNA.
We definitely didn't use him as a weapon enough. This is what we've recognized now.
Yeah, right.
Damn. Well, I guess we blew that.
But his face has not been changed, and Odo knows that's part of the punishment, so that he is constantly reminded of what he used to be, and
I think
now
Jason
what he
said
is
it,
not.
one of our patrons, Jason Moe, in the chat, I believe it was him, said last night, Renee must have been like, oh, maybe I'll get out of prosthetics altogether. But no, many more ear masks to come.
Well, I mean, patrons know what I've got going on behind me there. It'll be dropping in the toys feed pretty soon. So maybe I want to get Chris's thing in. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Production meeting here on Deep Space Nine. So they arrive back at the station.
So cool, man. That ship is awesome.
The Defiant. Like now you're starting to now you're starting to get it. Yeah. They arrive back on the station, and Odo picks up his actual uniform from Garak. We are reminded, of course, that he's never actually had a uniform. He's gooed himself into it, but now he has to wear something. Odo is experiencing, hunger for the first time, and Garak's envies his chance to experience human things for the first time.
Including?
We'll get there. But first, Odo has to arrest Garak. And apparently, the sentence for attempted genocide and breaking into the most powerful nuclear sub in all of the Federation is 6 months in a holding cell. The Federation is very kind.
You had to think that Ben knew that risk when he invited Garak aboard.
Yes. You would think they would have done a better job protecting. Like, yes, Worf caught him, but he got way too far.
It's almost a better beat there if he runs into like computer resistance or something, because Ben has presupposed and they set up like
they laid a trap for him, which maybe they did, right? That I think that there's a because it is a bit of a wormhole to me how far he was able to get, but maybe I can fix the wormhole. But he didn't get as far as we thought he did, or he thought he did. That they were very much prepared.
But I mean, if we
trap.
had a nickel for every time the security aboard one of these vessels is the wormhole, then
Federation security
we don't
sucks.
need Patreon. We don't need Patreon anymore after that.
Exactly. So anyway, so he's gonna spend 6 months in a holding cell, which I believe that's what you call treason, but whatever. But you do understand his point, as we talked about. Like, we also understand where Garak's coming from 100%. So, difficult.
One man's treason is another man's missed opportunity.
Well, true. Treason is in the eye of the beholder, frequently. Then Odo's buxom fan comes in and makes it very clear she wants to take his humanoid body for a spin. And Garak continues to be his helpful gay wingman. Later, Sisko goes up to Odo, who has a headache, as he's still experiencing jumbles of images from his time in the Great Link. He can't make sense of it. And he says, when I joined with the other changelings in the Great Link, I felt something. Oh, you know what? Before we get into this, I didn't write it down, but on the second watching, I think it was really important. And Renee's performance is spectacular. Talking about the pain and the isolation of now being trapped in this body. And there's sort of a monologue there that Renee does. And there's an amazing shift that he does, right? He talks about this visceral pain and loneliness and isolation, and his emotions are right there, just like leaking out of him. And then he shifts. He's like, but I've got to focus on my job. And the Odo we know reemerges. Like, go back and watch Renee's performance. This is why he is a legendary actor, that he's able to have like that incredible pain and then just sucks it up.
I also think, like, it's such a cool Trek decision, and I don't even have half the lore of Data, but it's very much Data. I see him as very much a Pinocchio-esque figure, right? Where it's the search to be a real boy.
Oh, Data for sure, yeah.
And how being human is the ultimate prize, and it's the ultimate the evolution, right? And this scene is played different. This scene is played, I got what I wanted and realized, I gave all that up, and there's like a regret here.
Well, but I don't think he ever wanted to be human. I think human is the punishment.
Yes, you're right. But she said it but her delivery of that line was both. There was no sort of, well, that's what you get. There was no spite in it.
I think there was definitely spite.
Oh, I felt more like a jealousy, like this is what he wanted, right? Like, it's interesting. You could read it in many ways. Yeah.
No. I thought it was like, you want to be a human? Go be a human. You want to go live? You want to act like an animal? Go be an animal.
I got elements of that, but not too much. No, I got a lot of other stuff. Like we really tried so hard to get him, and we couldn't. He wants to be one of them, so we have to. Interesting.
Yeah.
But my point is that that's ballsy from a Trek perspective to be like, look, being a human is not necessarily not everyone wants to be an American. Not everyone it doesn't necessarily mean it's the epitome. And also, what does it mean if somebody that's on our side all of a sudden is regretting being one of them? Like, that's not a great place to be.
Yeah. It's complex. It's really complex, and you see all of that.
Yeah.
In Renee's.
It's like, let's say you bring over a German, right, like an expat to help build your bomb, right?
Right.
And you're like, okay, rah rah rah. But then like you see him in there, and he's like writing a letter to home, and he's like, oh, I miss the old days. And you're like,
yeah, right.
You know what I mean? That's where you want to be. It's just so awesome, right? It's so more nuanced. It's much more complicated. There's more questions than answers. Which is, I think, fascinating.
Yeah, and and Odo being this whole linchpin of the entire series.
But also, like, the lore he gives is really important. Is that in that pool, it isn't like a despot society. It is very
it's a shared consciousness.
It is very communal and pleasant.
Hold on, it just broke my brain here for a second. The shared consciousness is more malevolent than the individual. It's almost like their shared consciousness is the internet, right? It is the AI. Like, individually, you talk to people are generally pretty good, but the internet is a dark, evil, malevolent, angry place. We, as a group, we are much more dangerous than we are as an individual person.
Yes, and he says it. He's like, and I'll get into my sort of bigger picture thought read on it. He also says, he's like, I understand their distrust. I understand.
Sure.
It's once you get in those echo chambers, right? To use your internet analogy. Yeah. Keith, I had my brief stint in college. I studied a little bit of philosophy, and I actually saw some parallels here to, I think, now, you know what? I'll wait till Stembles.
All right. So we're almost there.
Yep.
So then Odo says, when I joined the other changelings in the Great Link, I felt something I'd never felt before. In that moment, I knew I was home. For the first time, I felt like I understood my people, their distrust of solids, their willingness to do anything to protect themselves, and in an instant, it was ripped away. I'm trapped in this body. I can never rejoin the link. My job is the only thing I have left. Then they see a monitor. Gowron is broadcasting a speech. He's sending troops into the Arachnis sector. Arachis, whatever. The Federation has 10 minutes to 10 minutes? 10 hours? 10 days? I wrote minutes. It's very quick.
Not a lot of time.
To leave or be attacked. Sisko puts the station on combat alert. Then Odo realizes something. And he says, during the link, I sensed the other changelings were trying to hide things from me. Faces, names. And one of them was him. I'm saying that he's one of them. Gowron, the head of the Klingon Empire, is a changeling. And that is the end of Season 4. Let us hand out some fancy and prestigious awards in a segment.
AlamarEmmys, count to 4. AlamarEmmys, then one more. AlamarEmmys, it's AlamarEmmys time!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's begin with wormholes.
Yeah, well, we talked about kind of the one thing, and it's Garak. It's clear from the beginning when he goes to Ben and asks to be on the ship, and Ben like lets him if.
Yeah.
You almost expected there to be a beat where Ben would have pre-anticipated that, but it's a small worm in a big pile of good. So
I choose to believe that he did,
Mhm.
and that Worf caught him because they put in some security in there.
yeah, I think we have to go.
I choose
we
to
have-
believe
yeah,
that.
we have to. Do
Yeah.
that. I don't really have anything else. It all kind of tracks. To a degree, the Wayun infecting him is awesome, but it also takes away sort of. I thought that, since they're all bioengineered and connected, it would have been kind of cool if they just had sort of a control over him, which I guess they did. It didn't have to be. Which I guess they lose now, right? Now that they've cut him free, they sort of lose their grasp on him as well, right?
Right. Sure. Yeah.
A lot of the wormholes I think in this episode are things we don't understand about what's happening in the Great Link and all of those kinds, which I think is purposefully vague and awesome that it is vague because we don't need to know and it makes it more scary that we don't. So yeah, I'm good with wormholes.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Yeah. I think my headcanon is that the security was not as lax. They were more on to what Garak was going to try to do than we said, and that's why they caught him. I'll take that. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it all tracks. I actually like that Wayun had to do it, that because like he's not software. They can't like patch him through Wi-Fi. It's like they do have these amazing abilities, but it's still organic.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can't just send an email virus. Like you have to do it's a real thing. And I just love the long-term story world building that thing in that episode that we don't like. You don't even know that it happened. And Deep Space Nine is amazing about that they lay tracks you don't even know are being laid.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that you're retrofitting in. It's written into the script. It is there intentionally 4 episodes ahead of time, a season ahead of time. So they are definitely not flying by the seat of their pants. Let's talk best moment.
Yeah, I mean, Renee, he's one of those actors, and this episode is one of those performances where it's so good that you don't even know how good it is.
Yeah.
Like Keith mentioned, if you go back and take isolated moments, like the one you mentioned earlier, you just recognize how good it is. So
Yeah.
I'll give, 2 examples. That last monologue where he's explaining the regret creeping in.
Yeah. Yep.
Remember that is a man saying words off a page. He wasn't actually in that lake. He wasn't actually talking to those people.
Right.
He didn't actually have that experience. And yet,
it's all Star Trek gobbledygook nonsense.
yeah. And when he says those things, you're like, yes. So like
Yeah.
all of the things we don't see in that scene where they're sitting in front of a blue screen,
He has to sell.
he has to sell to us, and
all that,
100% you're like, yeah, we're having philosophical debates over it.
And we're like, oh, we're feeling for you.
Another great example. Let's isolate. I'm going to use the scene where he's just walking. He's walking through the bridge, or the promenade.
Right.
It's just a dude with a heavy mask on and like a sweatshirt with some wax poured on it, walking down the corridor, right?
Right.
And yet he sells that he is fighting to keep his human form, having trouble walking, and maintaining his dignity throughout.
It's this trial. that
There's
he's
no
going through.
score that's taking place on set. There's sounds, and there's guy eating his egg salad over there in the corner. I mean, amongst all that, this man is giving you. So
He's killing it. Yeah.
So, I often think one of the easiest ways to remember how hard acting is to take a television show and put it on, or a good scene and put it on mute, right? Like take out the score, which really sells a lot of the story to us. Anyway, so I'm going to use that hallway scene, and just Renee's performance is just staggering.
Well, I mean, the another good way to do it is to look at the behind the scenes footage that we're going to get back to more of this with my brother Sean, what he's editing the sound effects from, where you actually hear what they're hearing, and
that's cool.
Like the silence, and them walking around. You hear like everything's made of plywood, so there's clunk 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 on the floor, and it does not have the sound effect, doesn't have the score. It feels very artificial, right? Because you don't have that hum, you don't have the whatever. How hard it must be to act under those conditions. Craziness. So I'll just be super quick about it. But I just want to highlight two other Renee moments acting-wise. And one is the scene with Quark and what he and Armin do subtextually. I love you. This might be goodbye. I'm scared, but I'm saying it through go screw yourself, right? Just so good, so emotional, so there. And also similar beat, but as he goes into the goo with Sisko and Bashir, that just a hint of a smile as he goes in, saying thank you and goodbye, possibly. Just his choice. I don't think it's in there that there's a hint of a smile there, but it is like, holy crap, what an amazing performance from Renee. All right, there it is.
You get some stamps. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stamps for you.
Okay, obviously the reveal that once again, lest you forget, we've got Manchurian candidates everywhere.
Yeah.
And we are now in control of the very unpredictable Klingon Empire to begin with, is awesome, right? What a great cliffhanger without being a cliffhanger, right? Also, there's like a death of sorts here, right? Changeling Odo, who you think is going to be the ultimate weapon. My what does Mike think is going to happen up to this point has always been Odo as a changeling will be the weapon that defeats the founders, but that's no longer on the table. Because he just one of us now. He's like, and he ain't a young man, and I don't think his fight skills are great, so we're gonna have to just have his intellect. I think that's awesome. Also, sort of something really interesting I took from this episode, or it's had me thinking about, I don't know why, is, very much, I think the Federation, and especially Ben Sisko and our heroes, are very much Rousseau, right? They're very much, humans at their core are good. Mankind is good.
Sure.
And the founders, it is revealed in this episode, aren't necessarily bad. They're just Thomas Hobbes, right? They're humans at their core are bad, with bad intentions, and if we give them the opportunity,
convinced of that. Yep.
If they are given the opportunity, they will do us harm, and thus we must protect ourselves proactively. Very much.
Yeah.
So it's Rousseau and Hobbes, like since the beginning of time, and whilst it's very altruistic to be a Rousseau and to believe that our core were very good, what that means is that in the opportunities that Garak comes upon, you generally choose not to blow everybody up.
Yep.
And some would say that's good versus evil, right? That's just good guys, bad guys, black versus white, but it's not. It's nuanced than that, because believing that everybody is at their core good is not saying everybody's good. As you said, Keith, like the internet, it's not good, right? But it does do good things, and having the technology and having that information is a net gain for us as a civilization. So it's more complicated than that. It is a philosophical quandary.
It is both. I think the better outlook. It is my outlook, and at the same time, it's also naive.
There's naivete
as we sit here in a country moonwalking itself into authoritarianism while watching TikTok, not understanding just the peril that we're in because of our naivety about institutions or whatever. We're in very dangerous times. We're like, it's all good. Let's watch Friends.
Yeah. And that said, right, that's the beauty of life in this brief moment we live in, Keith. Beauty, in quotes. But also in this episode, where this is the beauty of what we've built with Deep Space Nine, and I'm coming to appreciate it, is so we can have those huge thoughts we just were talking about, right? The fundamental philosophy of our very being, right? Mixed with, we've built up enough of the relationship with Bashir and O'Brien and with Kira and the test that we can have a quick scene where we're like, you know what? I'm going to bring my bro in to live with me because Keiko's hanging out with Kira too much and I think they're talking about me behind my back. And it can all make sense. The shortcut is there for those who've been paying attention. We can understand why Garak might want to do what he wants to do. We can understand why Ben would use Garak to bring Odo. All of those relationships have been established. They make sense. None of them are flip.
And why he would get a 6-month prison sentence for attempted genocide.
Like,
for exactly what you're saying, how the Federation looks at things.
We even planted the seeds so that Kira's couple of sneeze outbursts are based in something we know about. Nothing is just random. It's so good. And then on top of that, dash in a little bit of the legendary Rene Aubergenois. Let him play with friend of the show, Andrew Robinson.
Yes.
Even Ben, who has very little to do in this episode, in the big picture, still feels like he's the one moving the chess pieces, right?
Yeah.
The Mumi actress is firmly presented, and God, you know what? Kudos to her performance as well. It is both terrifying when she lifts the veil, and also she's losing a son, and you see it and feel it, and has to execute a sentence that is clearly played
costing her something.
Yeah, it's clearly played in a way that is so nuanced that Keith and I could pull two very different inspirations from it that both work, I think, in the grand plot.
But it's very parental.
Yeah.
It's like, and I'm not a parent, but I imagine when you have to punish your child in a significant way where you know that it's going to hurt them, it hurts you a little bit too. And you can see all of that.
So this episode for me, Keith, I don't believe it's 99.5 stem bolts, as CEO Jen was so happy to give it last night. I do feel like, and I think it was you that mentioned it, someone that mentioned it's almost a bottle episode in many ways.
Yeah, Jason did, yeah.
It's like kale, right? It's not the most flavorful of foods, but it is nutrient dense. And this episode is
kale.
Is so dense.
That's really funny.
And there's like Old Bay on it, right? You get the Old Bay of the Rene Aubergenois, so you're like, oh, he's just giving me everything. It's so tasty.
Old Aubergenois.
It's Rene Old Aubergenois on kale is how I'm feeling. So
wow.
I'm giving it a strong season finale, 95 self-sealing stem bolts. Hell yes, they're self-sealing.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. No, you covered a lot there, and I don't have a ton more to add to that. I think it is all of those things, like the depth and the complexity that Deep Space Nine is working with today. Working wise at this point, it makes the first couple seasons look like child's play. Mm-hmm. It makes Next Gen and the original series look like child's play. And I'm a huge fan, and there's some really, really beautiful specific stuff in there. But like the world building, the character building, the complexity of the story, the darkness, the philosophical ideas, the emotion, the pathos, like it's all there. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's just, and with the cliffhanger at the end, where you're like, oh God, what's gonna happen? It seems like we are, this is lighting a match. That we've been smolder, and at the beginning of the season we had some, a giant battle, it had a flare up, whatever. But it just boom, and then it came back smolder the whole time, and you can feel that match that just starting to light and know that we're there. That said, is this one of those episodes that is like, oh my god, because other than Odo's individual story, not a lot happens, right? So it's not one of these like crazy things, but everything is different and everything's the same. It's like it's so
it's like if you consider World War, the assassination of
Ferdinand or
Kaiser Wilhelm. This is the page before where some people had to get in a room and plan that.
Well, and I think the slow burn of this I think is actually good and important and relevant to today, because we always think about I guess I'm in a pretty dark place about where we're headed, but we think about the run up to these world wars. Like let's take the run up to World War II, right? And you had Hitler's first rise to power. He's thrown out. He's a laughing stock. He's nothing, and then he comes back.
Says exactly what he's going to do from the start.
Says exactly what he's going to do the whole time, and everyone takes him. Oh, he's talking in metaphor. It's not literal. Whatever. He's a buffoon. He got embarrassed before. But he's charismatic. He's fun to watch, but like he's not really going to do anything, right? He's not going to do the things he's saying. And so the run-ups to when it gets really dark are really long, and it doesn't seem serious until it's too late. And so I think that's what's happening here on the show as well, without getting too far into our real world here, where we, when I say that we're sleepwalking into some real dark shit, right? That's what we're doing today. But this is what the first 4 seasons of this show is happening. We're sort of like, there's some conflict or whatever, but we're good. We're the Federation. Everything's fine. We can negotiate out of this. We can whatever. We can sort it out. Not really realizing that these puzzle pieces are being stacked together. These, the Lego pieces have been built. There's this huge foundation built right underneath the surface of the dirt. There's a giant foundation. All you need to do is put that one keystone in there, and then, oh my god, everything has blown up. And we're like, what? Where did that come from? Well, it's all of these pieces being built up over 4 seasons. So I think there's parallels there in the show and parallels there in real life. Anyway, so for me, it gets 92.5 self-sealing stem bolts. I think it's very good. I don't think it's the best of the season even. But like you said about kale, it's really important, and it's going to make our digestion go real good. So before you pitch season 5, I just thought it would be nice to give a reference point about where we are in our ratings on a season-to-season basis, because now we have finished season 4. So season 1, my average rating was a 70.4, and yours was a 73.9. Season 2, they both went up, where you're both at 76.8. Season 3 went up again, up to 81 for me, and an 80.9 for you, basically 81 exactly for season 3. 84, so season 4 up to an 86.8 for me and an 84.5 for you. We are on the ski slope straight up heading into season 5.
So our average for season 4 hasn't even cracked 90 yet.
Has not cracked 90 yet.
So that fear of
on average.
That's funny how our fear of like, we're not going to be able to rank it, so it's going to get too high, has proven to be unfounded.
No. Well, it's certainly not on an average level. No. Mm-hmm. So, all right.
Things, averages.
Yeah. So, and lastly, this episode on IMDb is an 8.2, which puts it at episode 28 out of 173. Next week is Apocalypse Rising, but Mike is going to tell us.
A whole summer we get to just skip. We're getting right back into season 5.
Literally next week.
Which is awesome.
So tell us.
Yeah.
So Mike, what is season 5 of Deep Space Nine?
What would be cool, I think, is I'll give you the first half of the season. All right, that's all I got. I can conjure for you. I think what would be awesome is that the Klingons, it's going to take us a while to convince them that they are being gaslit, right? Because I think that, of course, they would think, if we brought them this information, of course they would think we would try to undermine their command so that we could get in their heads, right? So that's going to be our big challenge, right? Is convincing them that it's not a deep fake, right? That it's not a deep state, it's not a deep fake, it's legit. And I think that's going to allow us to utilize a lot more Worf in the top of season 5. And I think eventually, unfortunately, it's going to come to some pew-pews with the Klingons. But eventually, Keith, our boy Worf is going to bring the Klingons around, and they're going to be the first to join the Super Alliance, the Allied powers, to take on the Foundation. But that's the Founders. But that's step 1. Step 1, we're going to pew-pew with the Klingons. Worf is going to be our man Bashir, but Worf, he's going to bring the Klingons into the fold, and they're going to be our first allies in the big Foundation War. Dominion War.
Founders War. Yeah. Dominion War, yeah.
That's my first swing.
All right. I like it. Sounds exciting to me. We will see you back here next week with the season premiere of season 5. If you're listening this long, you either are or should be a part of our patrons at patreon.com/K&M. Check out our other shows. Look at my Star Trek toys, whatever. This has been so much fun. This is best part of my week, every single week. Thank you so much for watching and or listening on the podcasting service of your choice. We'll see you back next week with Apocalypse Rising! Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/K&M.